4 years after the referendum, half a year before the end of the transition period, it remains unclear where Brexit is supposed to lead. The government's promise that Brexit would be child's play has proven to be fundamentally false. Britain's Brexit was primarily a no to the EU. It has long been unclear where this positive turn should lead to. Now the formula of global Britain should describe the future role of the country. It is full of imagination and wishes. It is both a chimera and a fairy tale. This suggests a look at the expectations associated with Brexit. Global Britain is intended to open a return to global free trade. However, this vision comes at the wrong time. The peak of multilateral free trade has passed. The United States has been pursuing a strict America First course since 2016. Punitive tariffs are a central element of Trump's foreign policy. The president is in his election campaign and will negotiate with all harshness. The Washington dictation could not be less annoying than the supposed dictation from Brussels. Regional and bilateral trade agreements are supplanting global free trade. The corona crisis is accelerating this trend. Renationalization, protectionist trade barriers and regional barriers channel global trade. Supply chains should be shortened and become less vulnerable. Gigantic government aid programs flow exclusively in their own national economies and distort international competitive conditions. This makes dumping allegations, punitive tariffs or other restrictive measures most likely. The UK risks losing something irreplaceable: sympathy and respect. The WTO is only a shadow of itself. Its dispute settlement procedure is paralyzed. Since the end of the Doha round in 2008, there have been no more world trade talks in WTO format. The United States threatens to leave the WTO. What is a global trade regime worth when the greatest economic, financial and commercial power turns its back on it? If you watched another of my videos about the EU is the biggest economic power, but that depends if you leave fuel in the calculation. If you put fuel in, it's the USA. If you leave fuel out, it's the EU. The global economy is expected to shrink by 5% this year. With Brexit, the British lose privileged access to one of the most powerful regional organizations. You need to cut a new piece out of a smaller cake elsewhere. World trade is politically charged. Political disapproval is increasingly manifested in economic sanctions. Trade is linked to political conditions. Sanctions don't even stop at allies. Political reservations, for example, could affect trade relations with China. The hope of regaining control of national borders turns out to be an illusion. The Northern Ireland Protocol creates a hybrid role for this part of the UK. One country, two systems. Northern Ireland remains part of the EU economic order with a say in Brussels. There will be a new control regime on the Irish Sea that is likely to favour smuggling and black market activity, perhaps even tolerated by under-resourced authorities or deliberately turning a blind eye. Take back control may apply to London. Brexit means a loss of control for regional governments in the United Kingdom. Brexit was supposed to give the Westminster Parliament full sovereignty. The chaotic ups and downs of recent years have battered the reputation of this Parliament. It was powerless against its suspension in autumn 2019. Only the Supreme Court was able to clarify that it was illegal. Brexit plunged Britain into a constitutional crisis. The traditional balance of power between Parliament, government, Crown and people is disturbed. Parliament fought to prevent the country from falling without a withdrawal contract from the EU. It has disempowered itself on the much more important question of what a future trade regime with the EU should look like. Boris Johnson and his strategic advisor Cummings want to push back the role of Parliament and civil service and concentrate quasi-presidential powers with the Prime Minister. A key demand of the Brexit campaign was better control over immigration. From EU countries, it fell to less than half of 2015-16. In return, that from non-EU countries has risen and is now as high as the total immigration in 2016. Immigration has not decreased, it has only shifted in its composition. In the Hong Kong crisis, the Prime Minister has given residents with a British overseas passport unrestricted entry with work permits. That could affect 3 million Hong Kong Chinese, 10 times the current annual immigration, more than all EU citizens combined who are currently in British territory. In return, the immigration increases. Britons are applying for the citizenship of another country en masse. In Germany, applications have skyrocketed by 3,000%. In Ireland by 800% and in France by 500%. With the end of the transition period, the UK's commitment to contribute to the EU budget will cease to exist, up to now around about 10 billion net annually. However, these savings are offset by huge new additions. The UK government must provide national subsidies to farmers and fishermen. It must build up a national authority for environmental issues, drug approval, product safety, etc. New customs and border controls are required, and there is talk of 50,000 employees with the appropriate infrastructure. Planning for a no-deal exit from the EU alone costs £2 billion. The British economy faces high conversion and risk costs. All larger companies maintain special staffs to prepare for the consequences of Brexit. The cost of this is estimated at £5 billion. After the Brexit and Corona, tax revenues will collapse, but expenditure will rise sharply. The latest estimates for 2020 are expenditures 2,050 billion, revenue 780 billion, deficit 270 billion. That's 15% of a GDP that is expected to have shrunk by 10%. At the beginning of 2016, the pound was worth €1.30. After the referendum, it fell to €1.20. Today, it stands at €1.10. Experts consider a parity rate to be likely by the end of the year. That's a devaluation of almost 25% within 5 years. Trade and economic exchange promote political trust and common interests. Supply relationships mean vulnerability. Vulnerability justifies security interests. Should the United Kingdom turn away from the EU, its security policy horizon will shift. British reconnaissance and military contingency planning, as well as the structure and equipment of the armed forces, will focus on areas outside Europe. England risks losing something irreplaceable: sympathy and respect. Doubts grow about the reliability of the London government. Rough demands, malicious taunts, chaotic decision-making processes, and a relapse into Stalinist polemics make even Anglophile observers shake their heads in amazement. The ancient Chimera I mentioned, by the way, was a mythical creature born of pure poetic imagination. It consisted of a lion, goat, and dragon. Global Britain also appears as a product of fairy tale fantasy inspired by hubris, nostalgia, and utopia. And if you now want to know more about European politics from a German point of view, YouTube has chosen another of my videos for you right here in the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy und viel Spaß!